All right. Hello and welcome to Sexual Alchemy. Today I have the honor of speaking with Mina Bahadori. She is a Reiki master, a breathwork facilitator, a crystal healer, an overall spiritual goddess. She is a millennial that I am so blessed to have in my life. Welcome, Mina. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be with you.
Great. I'm so excited to delve into uh, sexual alchemy subjects with women of your generation. I have to say, it's so inspiring to me. You are a little over 2 decades behind me, or I should say ahead of me in some ways, in many ways. But I find it so refreshing to speak with women of your generation about sexual alchemy, about their own sexual identities, about their own sexual sovereignty, about their own sexual liberation. It always surprises me because I'm reminded again and again when I speak to women of your generation, things that I've had to undo in my own programming, just being 2 decades older. And, what we learn from women of younger generations and things that they have to teach us is so interesting for me. So I want to delve into that with you and honor already what I've learned from you and what the space you've held as a liberated, conscious, spiritual, sexual woman. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And there's still more for me to undo from what's been passed down from my family.
Mm-hmm.
Even we were just speaking about like posting a selfie, like specifically one in a bathing suit, or even just one where you just look really good in a sort of sexy dress. Like as a spiritual teacher, I feel like I, even in my own like personal yoga community, was taught to sort of be modest and hide your beauty so that you're not, creating ideas in people's heads that, maybe that you're available or that they can sort of kind of inch their way into your sphere. And definitely like I'm aware of those things no matter what you're dressed as. That can happen no matter what. I've definitely had people crossing boundaries, even dressed in all white and wearing a turban. So it doesn't necessarily reflect on what you're wearing as much as just people testing you in other ways. But I will say it's very liberating to break out of certain rules and not listen to familial programs or spiritual programs and just post a photo that you look good in because you like it and it makes you feel good. And I found that mostly women were, commenting and giving me words of affirmation, and I didn't get any creepy comments, which was actually like a huge win. So I actually think it's women who feel really inspired by you as a woman, like stepping up and loving who you are.
That's such a huge thing. The idea that like, what is the difference between our sexual liberation and our sexual objectification, right? Mm-hmm. It's all about our own intentionality. It's all about our own ability to take our power back, right? In terms of, this is my body. I feel good in it. I want to celebrate it, versus this is my body for you to consume.
Right.
Those are two totally different energies, right? This is my body. I hope you like it. Are the angles pleasing to the current norm of, fashions? Is it boobs this millennial, is it boobs this decade? Is it butts this decade? Am I supposed to be, super athletic and buff? Do I need to be super curvy? What is the cultural norm that I'm expected to fit into and therefore feel good or bad about myself accordingly? That is a totally different energy behind posting a selfie versus I feel good, I feel proud of my body, I feel safe in my body, and I want to celebrate that and therefore proceeding, right?
Yeah.
And as a woman of your generation, given the culture that you guys are in terms of this is your norm, you did not know from Instagram beforehand, right? This is such a part of your adulthood, right? Certainly in the last, 10 years, Facebook and everything else. So how do you see yourself through a lens that's not filtered through the eyes of everybody else, through the eyes of social media, right?
Right. Yeah, I think in the beginning, especially when I was like in my early 20s, I was seeking external validation way more so. And yeah, was trying to fit into the trends and yeah, be super fit and, essentially did go through an eating disorder. I, even had an addiction to Adderall because it kept the weight off. So there was definitely a lot of that pressure. And then when I got into spirituality and stopped wearing makeup for a long period of time, even stopped having sex for about 2 years, stopped drinking for 2 years, it was a reset for me. And I felt that reset was super helpful. I was able to go back in and approach everything much more consciously and just really love my body. And actually, this is like a surprising moment where I really learned to love my body, which was actually on a psychedelic. It was a very intentional and spiritual moment that I took, I believe, either mushrooms or LSD with my brother, went to the beach, like was aware of like how much I cared about how my body looked to other people. And I was so struggling with that. And I just couldn't understand how to break out of it. But honestly, like that psychedelic opened up certain clairaudience and I heard certain messages, and like when I got home and I was still like having a little bit of the sensations and experience of the psychedelic, I looked at myself in the mirror and like I actually really saw my soul, and I heard some sort of a message. I can't remember exactly now, but something along the lines of like, I'm gonna treat you well, like it's okay, like I'm gonna be with myself for the rest of my life. So like this is the moment where I embrace myself. And I really did have that moment, and it really did transfer into my whole life. And since then, like I've really learned to embrace all the imperfections of my body and the fluctuations of my body. Like I don't try at all to even like work out consistently or like restrict anything that I eat. I eat plant-based, but other than that, like I don't limit carbs or, sugar or anything, because it's just a privilege for me right now to just enjoy life. And at one point I couldn't even eat a piece of bread without feeling horrible about it. And I know so many women have gone through that.
And so many women live in that perpetuity of just shame and guilt and not being able to enjoy their sustenance, right?
Exactly.
Just basic sustenance that brings shame and guilt and pain. One of our dear friends, Satdev Bir Singh, talks about that the energy behind something, if it's led by shame and guilt, the outcome will never be good. Meaning, like if you're racing and in that battle with your body all the time of shame and guilt, and it's not good enough, and so I've got to work out, and I've got to eat all these foods, and I can't eat this, and I've got to go into this system of deprivation. Even if you're healthy, quote unquote, there's not going to be the good feeling because the motivation, the intentionality behind it is negative.
Exactly.
Right? Versus what you're talking about and this shift that you quite tangibly had, given that gift of an awakening, right? That you can start to look at it differently and be like, I'm going to give myself the sustenance. I'm even going to give myself the enjoyment because I deserve to. And it's my body and it's my life, and that's it. But what a huge declarative statement for a young woman to make, and how unfortunately rare.
Yeah, I know. I grew up in LA, and so also I think my experience was like really intense, like early on, and then I was somehow able to let it go. But not everyone gets out of that cycle at all. And most of my friends had eating disorders in college, so there was there was no one keeping anyone in check or accountable. Everyone was like privately just going through their own struggle.
Yeah. And it becomes the norm, right? That everybody's going through that whole, And it's not like, with food addictions or food, deprivation and whatnot. It's not like that's something that you can ever avoid, because we must eat to live, right? So there's no way that you can just not have that problem. It's always in your life, 3 meals a day, right?
Yeah.
So how much that takes over is ever present.
Yeah.
And it's a thing that certainly has gotten a lot more attention, but it's so interesting to hear from a generation who's hopefully finding solutions to that obsession, right? That we all are given.
And it's really
It's
an
kind of
obsession.
given to us, right? It's like almost an expectation that you should be obsessed with your body.
Right. I think it's more an obsession with wanting to be loved, because being of a certain body type equals receiving the love you want in our minds and our programming. And you have to, yeah, I don't know. It's like you just have to go through that, I suppose, and hopefully come out on the other side of it, and hopefully be with someone who really does not engage or enable that behavior in a way. Like, for example, I remember like my first relationship. I don't know. I just felt the need to look a certain way because, I don't know, they looked really good and they really cared about their body. And then I was in a relationship where they could not care less about, like, the certain things that used to bother me so much, like even things like body hair, which is also like another subject with the shifts and the trends. Like, he did not care either way. So it was just really interesting to just decide, well, what makes me feel good, and like, what is my avatar at its best? Because it is just like ultimately an avatar. And I think that brought a lot of relief too, to think like, this is just like what we're choosing to present ourselves as in this lifetime. And yeah, like, why get so caught up in pettiness? We have bigger things to do here.
Like that statement. Oh, ladies, please, can we look at that, right? I mean, so Mina and I taught a divine feminine workshop over the weekend, and one of our biggest themes was about, let's stop shaking our fist at all the things that we want to change. Not that we shouldn't do that and we don't need to actively change them, but we also, more importantly, need to consciously project the more important things we need to do here, right? We really need to consciously project into what kind of future we want as females, what kind of future we want as a more egalitarian society, ultimately, that reveres the feminine rather than desecrates and overpowers it. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the biggest thing that I love teaming up with someone of your generation who's so conscious, who's done the work, who's fought some of the battles within yourself, but also has a really awakened spiritual sense and practice and abilities, for sure, into what is it we're going to look to? What can we look toward the future? What do we want to activate and empower?
Yeah. And I do feel like the scales are balancing, and you do see on social media people, with like curves. I mean, not just curves, but like people loving on their body, like being a completely untraditional body type and loving on their body. People with body hair, people, embracing sex work, people singing about their wetness. And we even mentioned that, was it you who said, like, in the past that women would purposefully keep themselves dry with like a certain thing?
Talcum powder. Yeah.
So that's so wild. I mean, it's just amazing to me. And it's like, it's about time. Men have been singing about their member for I don't know how long. And yeah, so I'm actually quite happy with the surgence of women empowered singing about their sexuality.
Yeah, and it is that I think it's so interesting. So we're speaking specifically, let's be specific about this wet ass pussy, right? And it's this celebration of the feminine. What is a female turned on is wet, right? I mean, that gets the job done. Otherwise it's not going to work. And
terrible.
What?
Or it's just going to be terrible.
There's going to be a lot of friction. It's not going to flow well. And the celebration of that flow of the feminine, of the juiciness and life-giving force, and like there is granted it's a graphic song and it's but in the rap tradition, right, it's talking about sexuality in this like empowered graphic way. And how many times have we heard about male rappers, hard cocks, celebrating, look how hard I am, aren't I the best, look how big I am, whatever. So for females to take that is, I have to say, as a woman who, of my generation, born in the 70s, I'm like, oh my God, that to me is shocking. And I have to be like, whoa, I have to sit with that for a minute, because I'm like, I don't even think in sex ed I was taught that was an important part of sexuality. It was just the male's penis got hard and then the act was done. And, in my mind, I was always thinking, what? When I first learned about the act. But how brazen, right, for women to talk about their sexuality in such a bold, empowered, and proud way, right? Because the feminine is dark and secretive and internal, right?
Yeah.
So what if we brought out that in a way that was saying, this is what's beautiful, this is what's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Very different, right?
Yeah, and that song is just going to open up the floodgates, and then there's going to be
all pun intended.
Because that is like, obviously a pretty extreme graphic version, but then there's going to be like, other beautiful sacred versions of that. And it's just going to be an exciting time, I think, for women to, prioritize their pleasure, because it's always been men getting it done or whatever. And just like, I don't know.
Yeah. And it's not the first time songs have been about female genitalia and sexual pleasure. You think of like Sheena Easton with Sugar Walls? There was a song in the 80s or so, and it was very graphic, but it was all euphemistic, right? It was all kind of like, not as overt. Yeah,
we're loud and we're just putting it all out there now, which I think goes along with the time. Everything, the veil has been pulled. Everything is just what it is.
Yeah. Well, and I think it also, desperate times, a call for desperate measures. Not that it's desperate, but it is like, we don't have time anymore to sit back and wait and, wait our turn. There is a shift going on right now that is a mandate from the feminine that says, me too, right? Mm-hmm. No more of the treatment that we've put up with for generations and generations. We're starting to look around and link arms and say, okay, we're telling the masculine, we're not going to tolerate this anymore. Yeah. And that's scary, and we get a lot of pushback from that. But there's always going to be the pendulum, right, in society, and then it'll go back a bit, and hopefully we get inches forward. As a millennial, what other shifts do you see happening right now that are important? Is there any other thing that you can speak of?
Well, I do. Back to the body hair, I think it's kind of interesting that, it's just shifted back and forth so much, but I think now people are learning to embrace like their natural body again. So that's a pretty cool thing.
Well, and if I may too, there has been speculation, certainly, that the removal of all body hair from adult women, right, is a certain kind of infantilization, right? Like there's the making them look like little girls. Mm-hmm. Is that less threatening, or is it more feminine to be hairless, right? Like, what does that mean? But is it more feminine to look young, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of the I think subliminal message too, right? So if you're to be hairless in your genitalia, then you look like a child, right?
Right.
Because adult women have hair.
Right.
So what is the the cultural norm, which has been normalized by porn, right? Let's
Yeah.
face it, because more and more
Right.
people see that, and that's just what you see, right? And it is an interesting kind of reflection of society. Well, what is the want of that, right? To be more exposed, to be more sensitive. Okay, fine. But also, it is important to talk about that it makes you look like a little girl. And is
Yeah.
that okay? And like, should we want that? It begs the question, doesn't it?
Oh my God. Yeah. It's actually really gross when you put it like that. What is that? I don't even know. But also, it's just like that women are marketed to also make themselves feel like they're not good as they are, that their natural form is problematic, and that they have to take all of these steps. Like, people's routines are so long before they can go out and see somebody. It's just
Yeah, but also, and always younger is better, younger is better, younger is
mm,
better, right? And so my point about that is not even to just say that that's an intentional thing about the body hair, but it just becomes one more level of younger is better. Your body is not okay as it is, to your point, right? That you have to feel shame if you have what's normal, right?
yeah.
Yeah, and it's one more way, really, of keeping us controlled and in this state of we're not enough. And like, to your point, we got bigger shit to do, right?
I
Than
know.
obsess about, am I shaved the right way? Do I look the right way? Have I, the amount of effort the average woman puts together before she walks out the door versus what the average man does is exhausting, right?
It's just completely unfair. It doesn't even make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you look at all the marketing campaigns of like why a woman's razor, which is essentially the same thing, is marketed and costs more
Right.
than the man's razor because she's probably willing to pay it because she's used to all the amounts of self-care and spending that she's to some degree it's considered good grooming, right? Like you can't just let it all go, right? And there's this expectation by society that you have to maintain a certain level of grooming to be attractive and acceptable, which is a very different standard than what is expected for a male.
Yeah, that drives me absolutely crazy, and I rebel against a lot of it, but then I like slip back into those programs, and it's so tricky as a woman to navigate the world and want to not just look, I guess, completely wild, because people will
I know.
but I don't know.
I don't think it's necessarily that we have to do one or the other. I think it's
Yeah.
just about being aware and having the conversations of the whys, and then it becomes a conscious choice versus I am not okay if I don't do this. I mean, some people point to people like Gloria Steinem or Jane Fonda, who forefront of the feminist movement, but have had plastic surgery and certainly do plenty to alternate their, to alter their bodies and keep up with a certain physical, attractiveness.
Right.
And is that hypocrisy, or is it just, are we all doing the best we can, right?
Definitely doing the best we can. Yeah. It's not easy. It's definitely not easy.
Yeah. But so going back to the selfie, if we may, so you posted a picture of yourself in a bathing suit in the pool. It was a lovely picture. You looked very strong and modest. It certainly
it wasn't even
like,
risque.
a thong and you're, hanging out all over. But it was, in the spiritual community, right? There is that, as we were, in the Kundalini community that we've been in together, the weird dichotomy of the virgin, right? That you have to be spiritual, you have to have this certain level of modesty and humility about your body and shame even. Yeah. How have you been processing that, especially in light of, if I may, what has come out about the spiritual teacher Yogi Bhajan and his hypocrisy around sexuality, and very different than what he taught.
Yeah, well, Yogi Bhajan, yeah, created so many rules that just are ridiculous in retrospect, given that he was doing terrible things to people. And first of all, like told women to not shave or not cut their hair, but then forced his secretaries to shave their pubic hair. So it's like,
well, his secretaries who he was having sexual relations with.
Yes, sorry.
Yes, it's okay. No, to be clear. Yes.
To be clear, yeah. So that's crazy. And then, yeah, wearing all white, hiding your hair. I feel also like the idea of being personally impersonal with your students, not creating a friendship with them, like always having a wall, which I always felt a wall between me and some of my senior teachers, and it always felt a little like off to me, actually. Like I couldn't really have like a genuine conversation with them. I felt like there was a distance always.
Mm-hmm.
And that never resonated with me. Yeah, first of all, like I feel like it sort of muted my identity to wear the all white and like present a certain version of myself, and also other people presenting a different version of themselves that's not really true. Like there are pretty malicious people looking very angelic because of the white, and it's like hiding who you really are, whether you
go ahead.
Yeah, whether you be an amazing pure soul or like a truly manipulative malicious person. It makes you look the same.
Well, and the white has this connotation of untouchable, right? Of pure and virginal, right? So that you have this holiness and this otherworldly quality, and that's lovely to aspire to, I guess, on some levels, right? To want to be, but the danger of it is also the bypassing, right? Is also the I'm not in this body, and the disconnect, especially for women, that we have to be, because we're still living in that virgin whore society, right? That there is this purity or this defilement, and that's something I wanted to speak about with you as well, in terms of, like, I call it kind of the virginity myth.
Yeah.
But the idea that a woman is more valuable with that virginal quality, that untouched, right? That which is always a commodity, right? It's always an exchange, because to some degree it's all viewed through the male scope, that if a man has touched you, you are now less valuable for other men and for the world to some degree. Very different. A male virgin, if anything, is not aspired to, not longed for. If anything, you want to get rid of that, right?
Yeah. It's so wild. I mean, to speak in millennial terms, I saw this meme and this meme was displaying, like, on one side, like a man has an idea that if a woman has sex with the same man 30 times, her like vagina is perfectly intact, while if she has sex with 30 different men, they have an idea that it's like completely like blown out of proportion, wide, like defiled, bad. And it's like, that's the same amount of times you've had sex. It does not change it does not alter the shape. No. It's just completely a myth. And it does go along the lines of, like, the virgin myth, and that a woman is like pure and tight, and like it's just so disgusting. But I've heard that you can actually, what is the word for that area? Like when
rejuvenate. Rejuvenate, is that what you're talking about?
Like when you're riding a horse, you can break
the hymen.
the hymen. So yeah, there's like that concept of the hymen, and I guess your husband is supposed to break it in this virgin myth. Yeah, but that's also completely untrue because women can break it on their own.
Yeah, it just happens. And
Yeah.
and there's a lot to be researched about that too, because it is kind of a myth that gets perpetuated that you're like, the seal is broken and therefore you somehow are less valuable. It's been opened, so it's non-returnable.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about back in different, and certainly in ongoing societies, that if a woman is defiled or raped, or she's shame to her family, she's a shame to her community, she brings shame to herself, that she's somehow damaged now and less valuable. I mean, that has gone on for centuries in so many different cultures. And so what fascinates me about human nature and about that kind of continuity of a certain theme is the misogyny and control aspect, right? That like, it is so powerful to be a woman. It is so powerful to be the source of reproduction, that the need to control it is so powerful. The need to dominate that, to assure patriarchy, right? That's so much of what marriage was about. That's so much what virginity is about. If we can control that you are only having sex with this one man and he owns your vagina and your reproductive organ,
Right.
it's less likely you're going to get cuckolded or have the offspring of another man with that woman. Certainly that was much more of an issue before they could test for these things. But that's a lot of it, right? It's the control of the feminine power, which is reproduction, which is life-giving source.
Yeah. I like that you said own, because it is like an ownership. They almost, treat that as property. And I've felt this in certain like sexual relationships, that men like to feel like they own your body, and that's so inappropriate and wrong on so many levels. And and I think that is perpetuated with porn and things like that, where they do want to like dominate you. Yeah, and yeah, for some reason that's a turn on to them, when that's really sad, actually. Like, why do they need to own the woman's body?
Right. Unless they feel threatened, right?
Unless they feel threatened. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's something that I wanted to mention in the spiritual community, that the idea that we were taught that as a woman, you get imprinted by however many men you have sex with, that they somehow stay in you, in your energetic space. And the implications of that are a certain degree of shame, right? That you've now polluted yourself, right? Did you get that? Like when you were going through the teachings, was that something that you integrated, or how did you respond to that as a woman of your generation?
Yeah, I did. I took that in, and that was when I decided not to have sex for 2 years, which was like a good reset, but also like slippery slope with the programming of shame and guilt of who I let in. I do believe on some level, like, you're exchanging energy with the person that you have sex with, and you should have sex with someone that you also would want to be, because you should feel inspired by that person. You should feel, good about that person that you let in. But
I heard those exact words from a male, and he said, I would never have sex with someone who I wouldn't also want to be.
yeah.
Meaning, he understood that for him, it was an energetic exchange, that portal that gets opened, right, when you go into that sexual space with someone, especially the more conscious you become, especially the more aware and sensitive, and the more your subtle body is activated, what is potentially created there, right? That you want to be with someone that you're not taking on negative aspects, that you're not taking on their pain body, sorry, I'm doing a recording. I'll edit that out. Yeah, and I think to that degree, that is what, the essence of what this podcast is about is not only undoing the shame and you know, untangling all the complications, but really getting to the crux of the magic of what is created when conscious beings have conscious sexual relations, and activating the higher spaces,
Yeah.
in the subtle body, right?
Yeah. I mean, sex can be a beautiful thing. But yeah, just back to the point of imprinting, I do not abide by that anymore. I don't believe that we hold all our partners.
Right.
I actually think Yogi Bhajan said that because he wanted his secretaries that he had sex with to feel that he was always with them, which is sort of a creepy thing, actually.
Yeah.
And I mean,
I've heard it in other cultures too,
okay.
but I think it's a patriarchal imposed belief that you know, that there's this shame and control that's implicit in taking someone inside your body, right?
Yeah, and for women to hold men forever, but men to not hold women forever. Come on.
Yeah, I know, it's interesting because I consider that from all different angles, because I also consider that it is a different act taking someone inside your body versus the externalization that sex is for males. So, you know, I think that is something to consider. Also, the potentiality that when you're taking someone inside them, you could potentially create offspring with them versus, you know, it is more personal in that sense. And I think that's to be honored, but that's ours to be honored, right? That's ours to be enjoyed and choose who we want to share that with, rather than an imposed, you know, societal belief that you're damned wrong, whore, you know, if you do, which is what we've lived with for so long, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So many different levels and so many different cultures. I mean, you think of the cultures that engage in declitterization, right? In what do they call it? Do you know what they call it? It's female circumcision. Female circumcision, which is the mutilation of the female. Can you hold on one sec? And the fact that that's a thing, right? So then it becomes much, you know, the belief being that then it becomes much easier to control women if you are thwarting a sexual desire, right? So then it becomes, then that female is much more likely able to be property versus her own autonomous being, right?
Yeah, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah. And yeah, it's just an interesting perspective to think of it all from all the different ways and all the different cultures that those tools get used and perpetuated and abused, right?
Yeah. Yeah, in that sense, we're lucky to be here, you know, in the US where we can make those choices for ourselves.
Yeah.
And
how are you feeling a shift in terms of letting go of the things once, you know, the allegations have been proved true, and you've been hosting this amazing Instagram talk you do twice a week with different people in the community overcoming abuses and things that they've endured. What have you learned, or what have you shifted in terms of your own sexual identity around that, because of the conversations and because of the allegations coming up?
I feel, you know, like I want to distance myself from organizations, from lineages that do try to silence women or control women in any way. Even if they're not doing it currently now, like if at any point they did, I'm more leaning into myself and distancing myself from like structures at the moment, which is why I do enjoy breath work in the sense that, I don't know, I don't feel connected to a governing body or like, you know, a lineage in a sense. So yeah, I mean, it's been hard for sure listening to stories from survivors and just as an empathetic person, like just feeling the energy of that. I was pretty depressed, like out of commission for, you know, in and out for a while. And now I'm feeling just better about it and just like more comfortable with myself, with moving forward, with, you know, letting go of certain dogma and rules that before I was adhering to. So in a way, I feel more free than I did before after the report and after, yeah, the allegations, you know, came out. I feel more free to just be myself and not look.
Yeah. I agree. I feel like it's given us a certain sense of huge freedom and huge liberation, and it's up to us what we do with it. And that's what's exciting about heading into the future and what we're creating, which I love aligning with women of your generation so that we can really help activate that and find that space.
Yeah.
So to close, I just want to thank you so much for your perspective and your beautiful grace and your own journey and all the healing that you've done in your own life. As a young woman, it's so inspiring to see from a woman of my generation to see your generation moving in such a positive way. And I hope that you will continue to do so. I know that you and I will continue to team up and do divine feminine workshops in whatever way that we feel is appropriate moving forward. If people wanted to follow you or find more information, how could they check you out?
Yeah, my Instagram is Mystical Mina, and my website is mysticalmina.com. So pretty
great content, I can attest. Mina, it's such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for being on Sexual Alchemy, and to be continued. More discussions.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.